Stick around, folks. We've got a really fun guest that's going to be surprise guest
right
is going to be sitting in this chair right here, in person. And Corbin, I'd say it's time for the show.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moving Spotlight Podcast. My name is John Ruby, and I'm here with my main man,
Corbin Coyle. Hey, everyone.
Hey, Corbin's here, guys. Corbin's in the house. We have a special guest who I'm excited to introduce sitting next to me, our first in-person guest.
I know,
Corbin,
so exciting. I know, I'm so excited about it.
So sitting next to me is Gay Alberts Ruby. She has worked in radio, TV, communications for FEMA. She's a wife, a grandmother, and most important of all, she is my mother. Welcome to the show, Gay Alberts Ruby.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Oh my gosh. So she's been a communications coach. How was my intro?
Your intro was perfect.
Could be louder. Could be louder.
But of course, this is your mother speaking.
Yes, of course. So it's going to be a lot of gratitude and support and things like that. So I'm very excited to have my mom here. I thought it'd be really neat to kind of talk about her and her career and what she's done. And because they're in from out of town, I thought we just, we kind of jump right in.
Well, can I just stop right here?
Oh, geez. Okay.
and tell you about, this was a FEMA experience.
Okay.
That happened in Indianapolis, and Indianapolis had tornadoes, and I was deployed there, and I was put on the morning show, which is big. Mm-hmm. You know, you want to be on the morning commute show or the afternoon commute show. And so I was given the time, I was ready to do the interview, and the person introduced me like you just did, but didn't introduce me. They must have introduced someone that was supposed to be on the next day. And I'm thinking, okay, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Because obviously I want to communicate my message. I don't want to embarrass the person, but we're live. Okay. So what I did, knowing, because I've been behind the scenes too on the radio, I just started talking and I said, well, that sounds like a very interesting guest, but actually I am Gay Alberts Ruby. I work for FEMA. I am here in Indianapolis to talk about, and I talked for about 3 minutes, and I could just see the guy on the other end scrambling his papers, looking around. I gave him as much time as I could to get organized, get calm. And then when he came back, he said, oh, sorry, I gave you that, wrong introduction. That's for tomorrow. And then we did the interview. So I guess that's just an example of, when you're a communicator, you have to put yourself in the headspace of the other person you're communicating with. I know this is maybe not how you wanted to start the interview.
No, this is great.
But just as you interviewed me, I just flashed back to that kind of stressful, but also challenging opportunity to redirect and give the other side some time to gain, to save face.
Well, what I started thinking about is that you were supporting that other person. You were taking care of that other person, right? And I think that's something that's, a lot of the times we do focus a lot on acting in the creative arts and things like that. But when you are, acting with someone, you want your partner to support you and you want to support them, and then you want them to trust you. And so if they make a mistake, you don't want to feel like you're on an island all by yourself. And what you were doing there is you were kind of taking care of that other person, which is such a wonderful thing when you're, Corbin, like I'm sure you felt when you're acting in a scene with someone and you feel that your partner there, when a mistake happens and you're supporting each other, you're like, that's okay. We're going to get through it together. I mean, I remember when I first started improvising, if a scene was going poorly, and this was being very green and not very good, it's like, I want to like slowly back off that stage. You know what I mean?
Away,
and just like, but then the other person just left up there. You can't do that. You got to stay up there. And it was a terrible feeling because it's like, let's say you feel like you're bombing or whatever. But the idea is, you're going to get through it. And I think, it's interesting you told that story, because I feel like one of your biggest traits and strengths is that you care about other people and you're very in tune with that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I really do. I think it's a really great thing to have.
I think even in our world, like listening obviously seems very important. And you clearly, I think you both actually listen very well, which is probably a very familial thing, which is, it's part of the acting. What made me flash too is that play I was in recently, and one person messed up a line and then I messed up. We were all over the map, and it was very important for me to say this one part that was really random if I started to say it. And kind of what you were just saying, Gay, it's just like, I have to kind of correct you a little bit, and we're in this together, and it's okay. Like, we just have to figure it out, and I have to listen very intuitively to make sure it's working right. But yeah, I just maybe flash back to that panic, but it's okay. It's like kind of a fun little panic, you know?
It is, and you get through it, and you know you will. Two things I want to say. One is, this is a different setup since my mom is here, and so just so people, if you're watching, Corbin's face is actually over here and the camera's here. So if you see our eyes going back and forth, I just want people to know that's what's happening.
That's me over there.
That's Corbin. We're like, yeah, we're still figuring out the setup. The second thing is, Corbin, with what you said, one of the things I was thinking about that is one of the reasons I really also wanted my mom on is one of the things she said, and it sticks with me still, is she said, you know, I was telling her something and she said, well, do you want me to listen or do you want me to give advice? And I think that's such a wonderful thing, especially for a parent to say. I know we have a lot of, you know, parents out there that are artists and actors and, you know, other careers, but I don't know, that's always stuck with me, that idea of like, you know, do you want me to listen? Do you want to give advice? Because I feel like people, especially parents, especially friends, we're real quick to give advice. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we go to. And so sometimes we're not totally listening. We're like thinking of, okay, what's the answer? What's the solution? Which sometimes that's helpful, but sometimes, you know, we just need someone to listen, and you know, we don't really need a quick solution.
Mm-hmm. I think
way?
that's really true.
Yeah.
That kind of brings me back to an early story with you, John, which you may not even remember.
Oh, here we go, Corbin.
It's not, I don't know if it's listening or if
Yeah.
it's differentiating that you are not the same as that other person.
Mm-hmm.
And the story is that you took Suzuki violin
Mm-hmm.
when you were young. One of the things we have 2 children, John has a younger sister, was music. We required them to do something in music every year. It could be an instrument, it could be singing, choral, but they had to do music because we felt so strongly that was important. Anyway, so you were taking Suzuki violin, and we went to a group lesson once, and you were the only one in the group. You were 3, I think, 3 or 4. You were the only one in the group who refused to play with the group. And my first reaction, because I'm human, was to get angry, to get frustrated, to feel like, what's wrong? And then as I was walking you to the car, I realized I'm not you at all. You know, you are your own separate person, and you had the right to refuse to do that. And at that moment, when you were only 3, that was a aha moment for me, to realize that my ego, my success in life is not dependent on how you act. We're separate people. And I don't know if that's exactly related to listening, but I feel like that's when I learned to let you be you and not base any of my self-esteem on how you chose to act in the world. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that. No, but that's a really interesting story. And I that's a really insightful thing that I'm just kind of thinking about. You know, now I have, you know, a 5-year-old son, and I feel like I'm very, you know, affected by his choices in a sense, you know, and it's not that it's not a disconnect, but it's allowing that independence. And
Exactly.
I think that's what you're saying. That's a really kind of, you know, that can be challenging because we see it as a reflection of ourselves, you know, especially
Absolutely.
if you're parenting or whatever. And so I think that, like, kind of letting go of that, you know, it can be hard, but it does make sense.
Well, I think it's also true in adult to adult relationships. I think sometimes if you have a partner and you're trying to navigate that relationship, sometimes the partner will do something that embarrasses you or appalls you. But that partner is not you. And you don't have to control that behavior. Now, certainly you may want to have a conversation, you may need some counseling, but I think there's so many problems in the world that could be solved by taking care of yourself. And so I think that goes back to, I do remember, you know, when someone wants to talk to me about something, no matter who it is, I will always ask, do you just want me to hear you out? Or are you looking for advice? I think so many people are so quick to try to give advice, and that's usually not what people want. It really isn't. Or maybe they do, and then they'll tell you, yes, I really need some brainstorm with me, you know, and then it's appropriate.
Well, I was also just thinking about in relationships with what you said. It's funny because my dad and my mom are very much opposites, Corbin, which is really funny. My dad's much more of an introvert. My mom is much more of an extrovert. And Annie, my wife, and I are very much like that. Like we're kind of opposites. But what I've started to say is complementary versus opposites.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting thing because you can kind of approach things from different directions, you know. And I think that's an interesting thing. Corbin, as Los Angeles's most eligible bachelor.
Yes, go on.
What have you experienced with like relationships or you know kind of that world?
Yeah, I think Gay was kind of hitting on the head when it comes to, well, one, I think in general, yeah, opposites it can be attractive, right? Like you kind of want to find somebody who is, what I've noticed is that it's the thing that brings you to that person, but you can easily resent that about them because you don't have that as well. And so there's a bit of, you want to kind of, as Gay was saying, communicate it. Like you don't have to do it in a way that you're wrong, I'm right. You're an individual, and there's the things that I love about you, and this is stuff that is good or bad. But that depends on like how far the relationship has gone, like all the things that are part of it. And that's my understanding of, you know, being the eligible bachelor that I am. Like what the whole sphere is. It's just like, at first you're like, ooh, you're intriguing because you're blonde. But then later you're like, I don't really like blondes. You know, so it's like, it's kind of like a you know, catch-22, I guess. But that's the interesting part of, you know, finding something.
Well, I was thinking, you know, one of the things that Annie and I realize is that she's really great at planning for the moment, and I'm really great at enjoying the moment. And one of the things, you know, as far as for artists, I have found for myself, I do really well with partnerships when I work with other people, and part of that is, you know, I'm thinking of, you know, I produced a feature film called Solver, available on Amazon Prime, and and working on that, my producing partner Jack, we're very similar in certain ways, but in other ways we're very different. And he is like a freight train in getting stuff done. And I so needed that. I needed those like kind of like side barriers. And it, you know, we complement each other really well. So, you know, his skills kind of complemented my skills in different areas. And I think, you know, whether that's an artistic partnership, which I think are great, because sometimes, you know, we can feel kind of solo in our careers, and having, you know, whether it's one person or multiple people, but having that other person that's like, you know, we got to get this done by Friday, when you're like, well, do we have a deadline or not? That can really, that other person, you know, can help, you know, set those things for you, set those kind of boundaries to help pushing forward, especially when you're not at your best, you know, or when you're not feeling energized.
Well, that brings back another FEMA story. Obviously, FEMA was a big part of my life.
Could you just tell what FEMA is for people that may not know?
FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and FEMA is responsible for responding to disasters throughout the United States. It's under the Department of Homeland Security. Wow. And I first started working for them in 2001, and my third deployment was 9/11. And that's what I'd like to talk about a little bit based on what you just said. One of the mantras that I live by is give what you have. It might be greater than you think. And that can refer to, maybe you're a baker and you like to bake things, and, you know, you might think, oh, well, everyone knows how to bake. That's not that hard. But if you bring baked goods at the right time to the right person or the right group, they'll be so happy. You know?
That's true.
Or maybe you're a good listener, or maybe you know how to draw, or maybe you can cut hair. You know, there's just so many things that you have that you think are easy, but someone else would really appreciate. Well, let me tell the story. So when we got to New York after 9/11, we got there 3 days after the towers fell. The city of New York took over that disaster and responded. And usually FEMA, as a federal agency, and the state run a large disaster like that. But because the city of New York is so huge, has so many resources, we were loaned to the city to help them respond to the disaster. But everyone in the city knew someone who had either died or had been affected very, very strongly by the towers falling. So they were working slowly. If you've ever been in if you've ever had a trauma in your life, you know, you go to work and you go slowly. You can't work at full speed because you're traumatized. So those of us who came from the outside, sure, we were slightly traumatized because it was a national disaster, but we weren't personally affected. So we were able to step in, organize, which is one of the things I love to do, create some products that New York needed and help those who needed help the most. So it's kind
Mhm.
of responding to, when someone's not doing well, when someone's weak, when someone's ill, when someone's having a mental health crisis, you need someone stronger to help you. And
Mhm.
so we were able to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important thing.
I think that really is. And I
Mhm.
was just thinking about, one of the things in my acting class I do enjoy doing is, I like hearing some feedback from my students to the other students. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of
Yeah.
times we do, let's say we look to the teacher or we look to, but sometimes it's like peer to peer, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that can mean so much. And so with what you're saying, I love that, kind of give what you have. It could be more, than you imagine. There is something really wonderful, about um, those little gestures,
Mhm.
that maybe it's it's a bit of that thoughtfulness, or that just the little gesture can mean a lot.
Sure. Sure. Or so this is a funny story. So I hope you don't mind if I talk a little bit more about 9/11.
No,
It was
no,
such a
no.
big part of my
Yeah.
deployment.
Yeah.
So you might think it was all serious, and it was, of course, very serious, and it was a terrible disaster. But there were light times, and one of the times was we had a Red Cross table that served lunch every day, and every day they had different volunteers serving lunch. And one day I went over, and the first woman who served me, the protein, I looked at her. She had no makeup on. She was drop dead gorgeous. Went to the second person for the vegetables, another drop dead gorgeous woman, no makeup. I just went down the line, and every single woman on this Red Cross line was beautiful. And I went back to where I was working, and I told some of the guys, "Oh, the women are gorgeous who are serving at the Red Cross lunch today." So they went over, and one of them came back and said, "Are you crazy? Didn't you recognize her? That's Heidi Klum and her supermodel friend." And I went, "Oh my goodness." And so they had volunteered that day. I know. So then
Wow.
all the men were going over and getting pictures. So I know it's totally off the subject,
Yeah.
but my point is that even within crisis times
Yeah.
or serious times, there are moments of levity and
Yeah.
when you can have a smile.
Sure. Yeah. Some of the guys were going back for fourth servings. They're like, "You've had enough, sir.
I'm so
You've had
full.
enough. I'm so full, but
Must flirt with Heidi Klum.
Must flirt. Break out the German. Do I speak any German?
What do I do here? Yeah,
You should have been there, John.
yeah. I was just in New York a couple weeks ago, and I went to the 9/11 memorial, and it was so beautiful. Like, it brought me to tears. I was fortunate not to know anybody who was a part of that disaster at all. Like, I didn't know I would feel the ways that I did, but it was so thoughtfully done. I was blown away by it. And if anybody's ever had a chance to go there, I fully recommend it. It's like, it's such a, like, the waterfall. It's just like the sound, the visuals, the names etched in like there, and it's like so. I think it's like iron. It just feels so raw and so New York, and it's such a beautiful spot. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a great, I haven't been there yet, Corbin, but I would like to go the next time I'm in New York. I want to transition a little bit, Mimi. One of the things I'm interested in, you were a communications coach, and I'm curious, just because one of the things, when dealing with acting or artists is, telling a story and communicating, and I'm just curious, kind of your experience doing that, and how you worked with people, and either building confidence in talking, or anything that comes to your mind in that world.
Well, it depends what you're trying to communicate.
Mm.
I mean, in general, I feel that if you are trying to give a message, you need to know how that message is going to benefit the receiver. So I always think about that. So tell me give me a scenario, and then I can.
Well, with what you just said there, it's interesting because one of the things, especially with like acting, we do is if you're trying to get someone you're acting with to do something, you'll try different tactics. So, that can be, you can be flirty, you can get angry, you can apply pressure. And even if you have kind of the same sentences, there's a different way to say, "I love you," or, "I love you," or, "I love you." There's different ways to kind of manipulate that. And I think, what's interesting is a lot of times with acting too, we're trying to kind of, I guess I would say, communicate kind of the subtext or the emotion. So we are definitely communicating a message, which may or may not be in line with the words, but we're trying to get someone to feel something. You know what I mean? We're trying to affect them. So, I mean, wouldn't you say part of like communicating when they leave, whatever it is that they leave with a feeling or something, you know what I mean? Like, how would you, yeah.
I think you need to be silent before you can communicate. And what I mean by that is if you're if you're going to be an actor or if you are going into a acting situation, I think you need to factor in some time to be silent, to close your eyes, to visualize, to get into the emotions and access any life experiences you've had. If you haven't had the life experience, do some reading. Talk to someone who has had a similar life experience to the character that you're going to try to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what I
Do,
would
do
suggest.
you? Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, although I'm not an actor. So,
Yeah.
but that's what I would say from a
No, it's
communication aspect. What about you, Corbin?
no, I feel that's true. Like this short that I'm in right now, I'm like, I took moments to like kind of step away and like kind of get into the mental space that I needed to be. And I guess I was curious when it comes to communication as it relates to acting too. Like, do you do a lot of like body language work, like, or is it just purely how you're feeling is kind of what comes across, or how do you teach people who are maybe more shy than others to communicate and like how to showcase that in a conducive way rather than, you know, because people get body language is, you know, what is it, like 75% of our communication or something crazy. So just curious your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I think it's important to find someone with a video camera, especially if you're going to be doing something, well, any acting audition or any acting at all. I think you need to, well, here I am using my hands.
Yeah.
But you want to look at yourself. You want to see if your shoulders are squinched up. You want to see if your arms are, if you're holding yourself tight. You want to see how your hands look. And you may have to consciously do exercises to relax your shoulders. And this is all part of acting. So I think working with someone who has a video camera who can give you this kind of feedback is vitally important. Body language is extremely important, and you can control it. You can control it. Sometimes when I would be working with people who would be maybe they were going to do a television interview, and we would videotape them, and they would be quite surprised how many times they said, maybe they had some and it's very unconscious, subconscious, or whatever the word is, unconscious.
Yeah.
And you need to see it and hear it, and then you need a trusted person to point those things out to you. You need to also, if you're the person teaching that person, you need to give them confidence because to be themselves. So maybe there will be some especially if it's just a speech, maybe not for your acting, but you don't want to change that person. So you want the person's essence to come out, but you also need to finesse it.
Well, they don't want to feel constricted. I mean, that's one of the things I really, whether you're giving a speech or acting, I'm a big preacher of freedom, so you feel a freedom in there. And so part of it, and sometimes, when you say, well, you're using your hands a lot, then the person feels like they can't use their hands and then they're kind of not themselves. And so it is kind of having an awareness. Maybe if it's too much, why are you laughing?
Yeah, I was just doing this, just holding my hands up. What do I do?
What do I do with my hands? I love that from Talladega Nights. And so I think it is kind of finding that balance. And that is an interesting thing too, with what you're saying, Mimi. I'm a big proponent of, doing stuff on camera and for a long time, acting was kind of taught more in a theater sense, scene study. And I think there's a lot of value in that too, but being on camera, it lets you know kind of what's going on, even if it can be, challenging sometimes to watch back. I wanted to also just, with what you were saying about that, I just want to talk about one time when I had to act with my mom here, which is one of my favorite stories. So, as everyone knows, we're in the time of self-tapes. And so, that can be very challenging. And the biggest thing that everyone is like, how do you get a full body slate? That's so tough now, without showing your whole apartment, which is a pain in the butt. But I was actually on a lovely ski trip with my parents, and then I got an audition for one of those kind of like Lifetime Christmas movies. So we had to figure out, we're in this kind of like, suite, hotel room type thing in Copper Mountain. And I had my mom read with me because I know, she's a good communicator, she'll be good. And then I kind of had my dad kind of running the camera. And so the reason she's laughing is the very first scene, usually when you have a kind of a non-actor, you're not getting too much. Well, with my mom, what cracks me up is she's like way like a big
Giving
actor.
it her all.
Yeah, she, her line was like, really? And I was like, well, that's a big question mark. So I didn't really want to give my mom feedback, but I was like, just a little less, just like you're really coming at me strong, So she took the note, which was good. And then the second scene was like, I was supposed to like be flirting with someone, and mom's like, should I look you in the eyes? I'm like, don't look at me. Like, just don't. Like, this is just like, just look at the paper, read with me.
Oh.
And then the other thing is we didn't have a tripod, so my dad had like MacGyvered like a paper cup upside down that he had cut a hole out of, and then the iPhone was in there, and that was like balancing on something. So he would like hit record and then be like, step away, and then I'd be like, Dad, is it recording? He's like, I don't know, I think so. I think I hit, and I'm like, well, let's do a take, and then we like, did we get it? Oh, I missed the button. So the reason I tell that, first of all, it's funny and I love it, cracks me up. But the second thing is, I would say, for everyone doing self-tapes, it's so challenging. You have to be an expert. You really have to be focused, because it was that self-tape actually turned out better than I thought it would, but it was a real challenge. On top of all that is still the acting and the lines and the relationship and all those other things with what's going on, and I know people have that. We have life. I think it's undeniable that, around that frame, we have life going on, and that could be a dog barking, that could be, whatever that is. I coach some people in New York, and like, you hear dump trucks backing up, or, police siren, that's all challenging, and it's a good take, so.
Did you book it?
I didn't book it. I wish and I booked it.
Yeah, nailed it.
If I was retelling the history, I'd be like, and I nailed it.
Yeah.
No, that one I did not.
Well, that reminds me of something, dealing with anxiety, because I think about that a lot with actors, because I think being nervous and being anxious probably gets in the way of a lot of
acting. Does, yeah. It's a challenge, yeah.
Well, it gets in the way of a lot of things. Like if you have an important job interview, and if you're too nervous and you communicate that during the interview, you might not get that job, So I did want to talk just a little bit about how to handle anxiety.
Great.
Number one, I think physical exercise is very important, particularly before an audition or, an important, you're going out for an important acting role. For the few days leading up, make sure you get whatever physical exercise you like, whether it's walking, running, swimming, whatever. I think that's extremely important. The other thing I think you need to tell yourself or ask yourself is, what's the worst thing that can happen if I don't get this job? And I think you need to think about it as, will this be a good fit? And the reason I say that is, when I was running my business, I did a lot of communication training for larger companies, some individuals, groups, and I wanted every job, but I knew I would not get very many of them. But I was very nervous before every one. But I would always say to myself, all I'm finding out is this the right fit? Is this a good fit for them and for me? And I would tell myself, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is I'll have some experience. I'll know maybe what not to do if I really blow it, which sometimes I did. And maybe I'll get the job, which would be wonderful. So I think the combination of making sure you're taking care of your body, and not just working out, but, eating the right things if possible. I know it's tempting. I eat the wrong things most of the time, but, especially if you have something important coming up, you know what is healthy for your body. Eat those things, exercise, tell yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? And are you the right fit? I think those things helped me a lot in reducing the anxiety before I was interviewing for these positions. And sometimes I got them and sometimes I didn't. I'm hoping that might help.
I love that. I love that. And I think, the only thing I'd add to that, and I've seen you do this, and we should flash a photo later of your notes. She's got a bunch of notes here, which is, is preparation. And I think with all those things you said, the last thing I'd add is, like, I know my mom prepares. And so my point is, you prepare as much as possible. And I've seen you do that. And I think that is something that, obviously makes sense. But I think sometimes we think, oh, I've prepared to, a 6. And it's like, well, can you prepare to a 10? And I think that's an interesting thing that, some people, if they think they've hit their limit or they prepare as much as possible, and there might be more there. And I think that preparation can really help when you have anxiety, because you've either done it enough times or you've tried it in different situations, that it doesn't throw you when either maybe something goes wrong or something new kind of happens. You've got enough momentum from your preparation and not having that. Yeah.
Well, I have another tip. I've lived a long time, so I have all these tips. You asked for advice, so you're getting it.
This is great.
And that is, let's say you have a huge paper due or a huge audition or something that you need to start work on, but it just seems intimidating and you really don't want to start on it because once you've started on it, it makes it so real. What I've done is I take a kitchen timer, and you could use your iPhone or something else, but I say I'm just going to work on this for 5 minutes. And so I set the timer for 5 minutes and I do something towards that goal. And not always, but sometimes after you've done it for 5 minutes, that'll extend to 10 and that'll extend to 15. And then you stop when you need to. And then the next time you start thinking, oh, I should be doing something on that. But, it seems like such a huge thing. Set another timer for 5 minutes. And that has really helped me in preparation. I think it's also okay if you are a procrastinator, and some of us are. It's also okay to procrastinate because maybe you do your best work. You need to know how much time you actually need, though.
Right.
So say you need 3 hours, you need to, okay, I'm going to procrastinate. I'm not going to do this until it's due Saturday. I'm going to do it Friday, but you've got to block out those, maybe 5 hours to do 3 hours of work. It's okay to procrastinate if that's when you can get your best work done. If being under the gun is what helps you, I think that's okay too. Maybe that's controversial, but
our first controversy. I like it, Mimi. She's throwing it down.
I don't know, Corbin, how do you?
Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, prepare.
Yeah, I over prepare too. I do exactly what you do. Like I'll take notes and kind of like go in. I think it depends on what it is. I'm learning more and more that there are two schools of thought when it comes to either your positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement, like whatever like kind of pushes you into doing the thing. I think negative reinforcement would be procrastination. It's like, I'm going to get fired or something, but that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. It's just like, you have to know that about yourself and like what works or doesn't work. And I definitely fall into that camp. So I need to find ways to trick my brain that this is really important. If it's a side job or something, like a little project on the side, I'll convince myself, oh, I got time. You have forever to do it. But really, you want to do it this week, which then causes anxiety and continues to like stress you out because exactly as you're saying, if you're not doing something towards it, you start thinking about it all the time. And if you just do 5 minutes, it's going to turn into 10 minutes easy. And then also you're 10 minutes further. And that's great.
Yep. How about you, John, for preparation?
I probably have all those problems you listed. I am a procrastinator. I need a deadline. I don't want to start the 5 minutes, all of those things. I mean, I think what one of my big realizations and, is I am definitely what I will call a starter. I love starting so many things. I'm like, and I know there's people like that where it's like, oh, I want to start this thing. And so then I start that. And then I'm like, oh, I want to start, like I mentioned like 18 different topics for podcasts and stuff to Corbin. Corbin's like, let's just stick to this one without saying it, and so I think being a starter, what's great is I have the energy, the positivity, I will take the steps, but what I have found is when I complete projects, that's when I really feel good. That's when there's really value. That's when I'm like, oh, it's not just accomplishing something, but it's like, it enhances things. So what's interesting for me, at least in this world, is I'm just thinking, and for other people, completing the project is part of it. And, one of the things that it's funny, I was just talking about last night is, I don't know the exact quote, but it's like, perfection is the enemy of the good or something. And sometimes it's like, I don't know if I exactly have that problem, but I do know people are like, well, it needs to be the right time and it needs to be the right thing. And that is one thing that I'm really not concerned about, the right time or, everything I need, everything needs to be all set before I can do this thing. Sometimes I'm like, let's just get the ball rolling and then see what happens. And then we can always kind of adjust. And I think that is definitely an advantage in the sense that, or a skill, because it's like, well, if you wait so long, it's amazing how much time goes by. And that's an interesting thing too, that especially with like actors, sometimes I'll talk to actors and they haven't acted in like 6 months or a year, and they want to be acting, and maybe they're doing the business side, or maybe life is busy, or they're working. But I think there's something, there's this book, Atomic Habits, that I haven't started reading, but I get emails from the guy who wrote it. He's got some great stuff about how to kind of set up, daily habits. And I think that's another thing. You're talking about those 5 minutes. I think, these small segments can add up, and sometimes you do need like 3 or 4 or 5 hours on stuff, but getting yourself in like a routine that works for the stuff you want to do, no matter what, level that's at. I think that's really important. If you want to be, doing plays and you're working on plays every day, or you want to be doing improv, or you want to be practicing on camera, I think that's where, for myself, I stay really busy with that stuff, the stuff I want to be doing. And so I think that has kind of helped build on itself, versus getting in a different world. And then, oh man, I'm working my butt off in this direction, and it's not feeding those other things,
Well, I think what you're bringing up is attention. What you give attention to is what your true values are. So if you're spending 10 hours a day on social media, that's what you're giving attention to. And while I know that's very tempting, I love social media. And I do spend, I think, more time than I should. But if that's all I'm doing, I'm not making money, I need to rethink what I'm paying attention to. And because what you pay attention to is who you are. And if you have a job, or if you have an audition and you find yourself not preparing for it, maybe it doesn't mean as much to you as you think it does. Maybe that isn't what you're supposed to be doing. And someone like you, John, who likes to complete a task, I think you need to know what type of person you are. I'm someone like that too. I like to finish tasks. So I spent decades in working for radio and television stations when those entities still had some integrity. I don't feel they really do anymore. But every day, at the end of the day, I had completed my work. And for my personality, that was good. Someone else could do something like be a researcher, and they're spending years trying to cure cancer, and that might suit them. But you need to know, are you a long-term project person, or do you like to complete things day by day or week by week? And maybe, you need to examine, am I doing the thing that really feeds my personality, or that my personality and my ego, and is this feeding me?
Well, yeah, I think that's so true. And I just thought kind of a mind shift is when you said that about completing the task, and I think I said I was more of a starter of tasks and completer, but
you did.
Look, I did. But what I'd say is, I also, for a long time, I think I thrived under like being a worker bee. So I really liked like classes. I like that structure. I like when I'm working for someone else and they're telling, and now that I'm more of an entrepreneur, more doing things on my own, that's a different mindset, so that's a different, and that can be challenging when it makes sense to like, okay, these things have been assigned, or these things I've been told to do. And I think that's a really important thing. It's like taking ownership. So at one point you're kind of giving away ownership, and you're like, okay, I'll meet your standards. I'll do it for you. It's got to be done. And then the other thing is now you're taking ownership, and that can be starting your own business. That can be acting. That can be a lot of different things. And that's a different parameter, that's then it's kind of on you. And I think that's been something that's been a bit of a mind change that I'm trying to embrace more and more. And I really give, credit to people that are doing that and doing that well, because I think that's kind of a thing where it used to be, well, you go 9 to 5 job, 40 hours a week. And that's model's kind of shifting, people are still doing that, but there's also opportunities to, create your own thing.
I mean, even within that 9 to 5, the people are creative in 2 hours of that. And, like you're trying to ramp up to those 4 hours to be like, you still have to be there. You still have to prepare and be ready for that creativity or whatever that is, whether you work in like accounting or whatever, like if you're finding out the perfect opportunity to do this thing, it's never going to come unless you're there, but you also have to be willing to just let it happen. You can't just like squeeze it and be like, come on, be creative, but it's hard. It's such a balance.
This book I'm just reading called, what was it called? Like, is it Set for Life? I should take a look. But one of the things, Corbin, with what you just said, he talks about in that book is, how luck can kind of play a role, but putting yourself in a position to get lucky.
Yes.
And I think, Mimi, with what you're saying, and I call her Mimi sometimes, that's what my son calls her. Mimi, with what you're saying is if you're watching, 10 hours of social media, it's hard to get lucky in a sense. Whereas if you're, I'm interested in real estate or acting, and you're kind of, going to a meetup.com or whatever those things are, you're kind of getting yourself in a position to maybe meet someone, to, find someone you connect with who then has an agent for, so I think it's like, luck we can't really control, but putting yourself in positions for
Mhm.
things to kind of happen, I think that's something that not that people forget, but that can be, kind of challenging to step outside your comfort zone.
Mhm.
But then once you do that, you realize, oh, this has some value,
Mhm. Mhm.
I think with all this positivity, I think this is a good time to segment to our favorite, or one of the two favorites, brag time.
Brag time. Brag
Brag
time.
time. This is the time for you to brag about something you've done in your life, Gay, and I want you to just have the floor to be able to talk about something that's very important to you, because we oftentimes don't get the opportunity to do that.
Oh, okay. Well, I know this is going to sound corny, but giving birth to my two children is what I'm proudest of. And I think there are a lot of parents out there who, no matter what kind of career they had, they may say the same thing. And our children have turned out very differently. John, as he says, is an entrepreneur and an actor. Our other child is a radiologist and a medical doctor. They both took their own paths. So I think parenting, it was very challenging, very, very challenging. I think it's one of the hardest jobs that you'll ever do in your life. But I think that's what I'm the proudest of.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That was lovely.
John plays a radiologist.
I play. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. There was a show called, I think it was like The Grinder, which was where Rob Lowe plays a lawyer and Fred Savage is his brother, who is a real lawyer in real life. And before that show came out, my sister and I were talking about, one person plays a doctor, the other is a doctor. I don't know if it was called. We were calling it Doctor. We had like an idea for a show, and then that one came out with lawyers. But that's definitely true. Yeah, I mean, it is. Well, that was lovely.
Well, and I have another thing to I guess brag about, and that is that when I was 22, I married a young man who was 27, and it's been almost 49 years, and we're still married. And anyone who's been married knows that any relationship is difficult, but marriage can be particularly difficult at times. As my husband said, we had 45 great years and 3 so. But I'm very proud of. So I guess in summary, I have some wonderful friends. For me, relationships have always been the most important thing in life. And now that I'm older, I'm looking at the studies. What makes you happy as you get into your 70s and 80s? I'm early into my 70s. Is relationships and savoring and caring for those relationships is important. I also acknowledge I've had a lot of privilege in my life. I've had white privilege. I've had enough finances. I've never gone hungry. And I acknowledge that, and trying to give back in any ways that I can, because I'm so grateful for my life.
I did just want to touch on that, because I think that's one thing you installed in me and Janine is, kind of volunteering and charity. Could you just talk, because I remember when you and my dad used to go to Parents' Place, could you just kind of say what you helped out with there, and because you helped out there a long time?
Yeah, I always wanted to. I took some time off to raise children, but even while raising children, I had my finger in, some kind of communication. So sometimes it was paid. Luckily, my husband was working the whole time. And I would either be working a communication job, radio, television, newspaper, FEMA, or I would be volunteering at an agency. And one of the proudest jobs that I did was up in Seattle. When we lived there, I worked for Big Sisters of Puget Sound, which is now Big Brothers Big Sisters of Seattle. I think they've since merged, but loved helping create mentorships, and strongly support that organization. Parents' Place, it was fun because my dad played Santa Claus. I played the accordion, so I got to play the accordion.
I forgot
You
that.
came as an elf, John. I don't know if you remember that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
I don't.
Yeah, that was lots of
But
fun.
that was a place for women who need a safe place to go, right?
Actually,
That's
that was
what
the women's center.
Oh, women's center. Okay.
Yeah, and I worked there
Yes.
as an employee in their shelter. and but also did a lot of volunteer work for them in communication.
Yeah.
Communication for me, that was what I majored in college, and it was the perfect major for me. And because there was so much flexibility, and we moved several times in the late 70s and early 80s to different communities. So in one community I worked in television, and the next community I worked in radio, and the next community I worked in something else. And I think I was an early gig economy person, where, you have to be flexible and creative. Loved moving. I always felt moving gives you an opportunity to reinvent yourself. And I would encourage any of you who are, nervous about moving and thinking, oh, I just love everything about this. If the opportunity comes up, you could always go back,
True.
And I feel that I feel like I have a PhD in geography or something, because we lived in California, we lived in Washington State. And I think moving is a very eye-opening and soul enriching experience.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I just, just quickly jumping back to the volunteering thing, one of the places I helped out, in Los Angeles is called the Midnight Mission, where they give meals, to homeless people and stuff like that. And I tried, with the pandemic, I stopped doing that, but I think trying to find something that, you can volunteer with if you have the time, stuff like that, I think is a really important, wonderful thing. So I, thank you for, instilling that in myself and stuff. Well, on that note, we want to take our a commercial break, and we'll be right back. If you're interested in learning more about acting or studying with John Ruby, please check out johnruby.com. There's more information about classes on the website. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
He's all right, I guess. I mean, he teaches, he does some stuff. It's fine.
And that's my best testimonial.
That's it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Still excited about this guest, my mom, and all the way from Wisconsin. Mom, something I want to talk to you about is I've always had strong female women in my life. My mother, my sister, my wife. Just wondered if you wanted to kind of talk about being a female when you were, in radio and TV, now, back in the day, kind of your impressions of that.
Okay, great. Well, when I was in high school, there were no women's sports, or very few women's sports. So that dates me. I was a teenager in the 60s. But when I graduated in 1972, I was pretty innocent. I really wasn't aware that there was as much sexism as there was. So I went for an interview with my communication arts degree to an advertising agency. And I don't even know why the gentleman asked me for the interview, because halfway through, he just looked at me and said, "Are you dating?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I'm engaged." And he said, "Well, why don't you stay home and have babies?"
Oh, jeez.
And that was the end of the interview. And I remember leaving and just thinking, what just happened?
Yeah. Wow.
That was crazy. And then later on in my career, I mean, there were several incidences that I don't really want to relay on the radio, but, or, on the podcast, but, one that I remember very well, I was the first woman that was ever hired at KVON, KVYN in Napa, California. And the owner at the time, I think he hired me because his daughter was coming up. She was a little bit younger than me, and she wanted to get into broadcasting. And I think he wanted to see how a woman could work. So I took a weekend shift, so Jay could watch you and your sister, and I worked. And the very first weekend I worked, he called me after I did news, weather, and sports on both stations. One was live, one was recorded. And he called me and he said, "Who wrote your sports? Is your husband there?" And I said, I was 30 at the time. I can write sports, and sports was very simple. It was, the scores and, anyone who's quitting or whatever. And so the next weekend I did it, I did the newscast again. And again, the owner called me and said, "Who's in there writing sports for you? Girls don't know sports." That's what he said to me.
Oh my
Girls don't know sports. I know. That's how far broadcasting has come, and now there are women anchors, and I'm sure there's still a sexism in many industries, just because that's the nature of our, of life. But those were two that really stood out for me. I feel like in subsequent jobs, I've tried to do things where my work spoke for itself. And currently I'm a wedding officiant, and I find couples who want usually a non-religious ceremony, although I have done religious ceremonies as well. But they want something a little bit different. They want it personal. They want me to tell their story. They want a little levity. And I've really, really enjoyed marrying couples. That's been fun.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little more about officiating. I just wanted to touch on what you said. I think one of the wonderful things about the entertainment business that I've noticed since I've been out in Hollywood and stuff is that there's, many more female directors,
yes,
and, writers. And I think that's a really, great thing, kind of behind the camera too, and so, and in front of the camera. So I think it, you were one of the pioneers, really.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's so
stuff
cool.
like that. Right. I mean, that's there's a famous story too, Corbin, at least in my family, where at Last Tango in Paris, my mom was like screaming at the movie theater, because like the woman gets naked, but Brando doesn't. And she's like, why is that? And my dad's just like sinking in his seat. But she was like, that's not fair,
Yeah,
so
that's true.
he was on the forefront of it, back in the day.
Wanting Brando naked, the forefront.
Yeah, come on. Why can't we see him naked? Why are the women always getting naked? So I was like, oh, yeah.
That's true.
And now I see way too much man butt on shows. I'm like, can we tone down the man butt? It's a lot of man butt now. Like I understand, let's equal it, but now it feels
you
like
wouldn't get paid to do man butt.
Yeah. No.
Too far.
Well, I also embarrassed him at his own movie, but he probably won't tell you about that one.
Oh my, no, that story we won't tell. No, that story is too that's too hot for hot for the podcast.
I gotta know.
Yes.
After the podcast,
After
you get
the
to know,
podcast,
Corbin.
we get to know a little bit more details.
That
Can't
is.
wait.
Oh my gosh, I'm debating on whether I want this story out there. So okay, I guess I'll tell it. So
Yes.
there's an independent film I did, and in the film, we premiered right outside Times Square at an AMC movie theater, and my parents met me there. They flew out. We all flew out. It was great having this premiere. And my mom's sitting to my right, my dad's sitting to my left. And in the movie, there I have a sex scene with my wife, and it's kind of like it's pretty intense sex scene. And it's like one of those things, when you're like watching a movie and your parents watch it, and it's of course it's like right during the sex scene, you know what I mean? And you feel just like fast forwarding.
But you're in it.
Yeah, but I was in it. So that was embarrassing
So
enough.
much
That
worse.
like I'm there. Yeah, so much worse. And then my mom leans over and I'm like, oh God, this is gonna get worse. And she goes, this is like the wittiest my mom's ever been. And she goes, just like his father. And I go, no,
Scarred forever.
no. And first of all, I was dying laughing, but also I was like scarred. And I was like, that was the funniest. I think it was the funniest
so
thing my mom's
funny.
ever said. And we still laugh. That was years ago. It's
Yeah.
just like his father. I was like, no.
I had to say it.
No,
Yeah.
you didn't. She didn't have
Well,
to.
no,
good.
She didn't have to.
what was happening? It was very uncomfortable
Yes.
for a mother,
Yeah.
and so the discomfort was building, and I had
You
some
had
kind
to,
of
yeah.
release. So that's what I said.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Was that-
Anyway,
I can't believe it, but I think that's the best thing I've ever heard.
was a classic.
I could
That was a-
only imagine if my mom said that to me while it's happening.
yeah, that was the thing. The scene wasn't over either. I'm like, oh God, I just need to leave. I need
sorry,
to get out
John.
of there.
This is a public apology. I'm
it was-
sorry.
Yeah.
Well, apology not accepted. Not,
He's never gonna
apology
forgive me.
denied. Denied.
What did your dad? Was your dad just silent the whole time?
I don't
Again,
remember,
I think
yeah.
he was
Yeah.
thinking like this.
Yeah, he
he's-
was real low. I think he
Mm.
was.
Yeah.
Just, he was.
He's
yeah.
used to me.
Yeah.
Oh
Oh my God.
This is classic.
That was so funny. So that was, yeah, I guess we shared that story. So, oh my gosh, that was great though. That was so funny. But I did want to jump back to what you said about being an officiant,
Mhm.
and it's called Circle of Life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so-
Well, I have actually a cute story to tell.
Yeah.
Actually, two cute stories. There was and they both involve children.
Mhm.
So one of them, I had not married the couple yet, and this little boy who was the nephew of the couple getting married asked his mother, who was standing right next to me, what does it mean to get married? He was only 5. He didn't really know. And she said, well, that means you've met someone that you love, and you're going to live with them for the rest of your life. And the little 5-year-old looked at both of us and said, that's rough. out of the mouth of babes, right?
Yeah.
So good.
That was funny. And then there was a couple that I married. The wife, the woman had 2 children, a boy and a girl, who were 11 and 9, and the groom had 3 boys, early teens. And we got together for the rehearsal, and or actually they were getting the kids ready to go to the rehearsal. And the bride told her little girl, "You're going to meet the officiant. Her name is Gay Ruby, and she's going to marry us." And the little girl said, "You're all getting married?" And she thought the 3 of us were getting married. She misunderstood when her mom said she's going to marry us.
Yeah.
She was
Who's
just
this new lady?
I know. Isn't that funny?
Mom?
Who do I call you? No.
That's funny.
So yeah, it's really fun. I haven't had any I don't have any horror stories. I'm so well prepared. I prepare myself very well. And I always have a backup person in case, like an understudy in case I can't do the ceremony. And sometimes the ceremonies create their own drama. There was one couple where the groom and the bride were 40 minutes late. And everything seemed to be okay. And then I just turned to the best man, because the best man's main duty usually is to have the rings. And so I just turned to him and said, "No, you have the rings, don't you?" And he got this stricken look on his face, and he ran to the car.
Wow.
But he actually got back
Before they were there.
before they got there. So, but it was like literally we could see them coming, so he was running to get back in time. But I love it. It's a very happy time in people's lives. And like I said, you never know what the kids are going to say.
No, no.
It's fun.
So having different careers in
Yep.
FEMA and being an officiant and communication coach, would you have any advice for people either starting a new career or, landing somewhere new? You said you've moved, what advice would you give people?
Well, let me just say one thing, and I think it'll answer your question. When I was in college, I was really lost, particularly in my first 2 years. And I remember looking for a book that would tell me how to live life. And I always thought, if I could find the book that tells me how to live life, then I'll have it. And I remember when we started moving, and it was hard. I loved it, but I was moving with 2 little kids, and I looked for a book. Is there a book that tells you how to move with kids? Well, I couldn't find one. And I realized after decades that there really is no book to tell you how to live your life. You just have to live it. And if you like writing, you could write the book that's not out there. But I think you have to keep looking. And the reason I say keep looking is I didn't find my soul's work until I was 51. And when I found FEMA, that was what I was born to do, but I didn't know it until I found it. And I think sometimes people aren't quite, happy with their lives at certain points. And they think, how do I find what I'm supposed to be doing? And I guess my only advice would be keep trying things, keep taking risks, keep your mind and your heart open. Another story that's kind of a funny story is when I say take risks, I'll give you an example. We were members of the Unitarian Universalist Church, and a woman came up to me once, and she said to me, her name is Marion. She said, "Gay, Ann and I would like to sing. We like to sing madrigals, and we've heard you singing in church, and we think you should be part of our group because my mom is gay, and they have a dog named Ruby, and your name is Gay Ruby." And I looked at her and I thought,
what?
This is the craziest thing I've ever heard. So I just looked at her and I said, "Let me think about it." And I went home and I thought, I'm going to do that because it's such a great story. I like singing. I don't know Marion or Ann, but I'm going to try it, and again, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, the worst thing that could happen is I don't enjoy it. I don't like the commitment and I'll back out. Guess what? We've been singing together off and on for 18 years.
That's amazing.
So, keep your heart and open, and keep taking risks and don't give up.
I was talking to somebody the other day about kind of what you're talking about, the meaning of life. Like what is the purpose? What is all that stuff? And it just ends up being like are you happy? Like, like it's really not that I mean, there's obviously it is complicated because you can't be happy all the time or do whatever you want all the time. But you think it's like, oh, if I achieve this job or if I achieve this thing or if I live in this place or whatever it is. But no, it's like, are you happy? Are you coming back every year for those 18 years to sing with these people? Like, that's amazing. Like, you just keep taking risks and keep trying new things because why not? There's no reason not to.
Totally.
That's a really good, Corbin. I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And I think it also depends where you are in your life. Cause I'm just thinking, I worked in casting for a long time and also an actor. And then I was teaching a little bit. I was teaching like a commercial acting class, and it was a lot of work to get students and things like that. And it just kind of didn't happen. So it kind of fizzled. And then 8 years later, when I was asked to teach again, it was like the right time in my life. And with what you're talking about, kind of finding, your purpose, that's one thing I feel with teaching is like, oh, this is just added so much to my world and to my life. And I just love it so much. And it's funny because it's also something I tried like 8 years earlier and it didn't have the same resonance, And so I think that's an interesting thing too, where it's like, you have to be in the right place yourself. And with what you're saying, Corbin, maybe, for me, like, or for other people, it's like, you need to have certain things established and then you can kind of get to that next level or whatever that thing is. But I think being open to it, it's like, you wouldn't have sang with them for 18 years if you hadn't thought, well, let's try this, and when I initially was asked to teach again, I said no. And then, then I was asked again, I was like, okay, so I think it's also interesting where it can come from.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then I think another thing besides, keep trying is forgiveness. I think forgiveness is so important in relationships. And when I say, okay, we've been married almost 49 years, there have been times when one of us has had to forgive the other one and move on. And I'll give you a funny example. I like to use funny examples. So we had been married maybe 10 years. And Jake had always played tennis and I never had. And so I asked him to teach me. And so he tried to teach me, but he was quite impatient. He really wasn't very patient with me as he was trying to teach me. And I realized this is not working. So I pulled him aside and I said, Jake, I want you to pretend this is our first date and you're trying to get into my pants. How would you?
Just like his father.
No, I gotta believe it. This is the sex podcast. Why?
Yeah. How would you teach me? And he thought about it. And guess what? He taught me in a very gentle, sweet, flirtatious way. And that's a very small example, but I think there are many occasions with a friend, with a partner, with anyone that you're in relationship with. We're all human beings. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to say something that is hurtful. We're going to do something that's insensitive. And we need to practice, at least try to practice forgiveness. Some things are almost unforgivable. I will acknowledge that. But for the things that can be forgiven, I always say forgive and start over.
Yep. Love that. Corbin, did you have anything on your list? I was thinking we could get to maybe favorite books or
I think that's great. Yeah. Let's start going there.
Yeah, Mimi, do you have some books you could recommend on your written down notes?
Of course, I have so many books. I love books. I always have many books at my bookstand. I think that there are times in your life when you won't have time to read books. And I will totally acknowledge that because I've been in those times of my life. Right now, I can read books. A couple books that affected me greatly were Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. If you like writing, if you're interested in writing, I highly recommend Bird by Bird. She also wrote another book called Operating Instructions, which is a tale of the first year of her child's life. So if you're a parent and you have a child who's 1 or 2, or you're going to have a child, either of those books, well, the Bird by Bird for writing and the Operating Instructions for having children. A book I'm reading right now that is really resonating with me is called The Sum of Us: What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. It's by Heather McGhee, and it talks about how racism affects everyone, not just minority people. Love it.
Great. Those are great. We haven't had those as suggestions, and I love it. I as soon as you said you love reading, it I was like, well, that's where I got my love of reading from. I think you and Dad both read a lot, and I've always been a passionate, voracious reader. So That's great.
It's hard to find time though, don't you think? When you have,
Well, it's funny. Then we go back to what I talk about with starting, which is I'm a big fan of libraries. So I know people order books on Amazon, but I'm just a fan of the library. I think, you can get it there and you can read it. You can always buy the book, which I think is also great. But I'll go to the library and come back with like 10 books. And Annie's like, are you going to read all those books? I'm like, yep. And then I never do, but I get so excited.
Yeah.
I'm like a kid in a candy store that like, this sounds interesting. This sounds interesting. This like, I could learn how to make neon signs, you know what I mean? Like that would be cool. And then, I don't get to, but I think I will read one of the 10, but what you're talking about, kind of that love of opening up to another world and seeing what's there, that's definitely something that has always kind of, I think, excited me about acting. You're going in different worlds, and then also starting a book where it's like, it's taking you, you're learning something new. It's taking you somewhere. I love that.
Yeah. That's so great. Well, I think we're on to the last segment here, which is going to be Gay's favorite segment.
Oh, no. What is it?
It's called Your Best Bad Acting.
Your
I'm
best
gonna,
bad
I'm
acting.
going to send something in the chat. That's going to be
Yes.
a quote from Marlon Brando, who
Okay.
Speaking of Brando.
Speaking of
boy.
Brando, on the waterfront.
Tell me if you can read this. And yeah, you know what? I have it written here. I actually typed it out here, so maybe that might help.
So you want me to be a bad actor?
So
You
can
just read it however you feel.
Oh, okay.
take your time. We're gonna give you an action. Can you read it there? Yeah. So have fun with it though. You can do
Yeah.
a Brando impression. You can do your own. Yes. Okay. So
This is not most unlike me as I can imagine.
that's why we grabbed it. Okay.
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody instead of a bum, which is what I am.
That's so good.
Good.
Oh.
Wait. We might give you a direction. So hold on to this.
Yeah. I love where it's at. I
Well,
love
Corbin
where it's
liked
at.
it.
Yeah.
Corbin liked
Oh
it.
yeah.
True.
Oh,
But
yeah,
I have notes. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Go first, Gordon.
I want to
got one for you.
hear your best Heidi Klum impression.
Oh my God.
Oh, this is good.
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody instead of a bum, which is what I am.
The breathing,
Whoa,
the
so
breathing was so good.
Hey, so Brandon.
I don't know how to do a German accent because I know
No,
she's
that-
German, but sorry.
That was perfect. No, that was. I don't even know if I could do that. Like that was amazing.
Now can I do my brain?
Oh wow,
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody instead of a bum, which is what I am.
You just hide this. Oh, John.
So
Mic drop. Mic drop for the
I was
Brando
gonna
impression.
clap. I was gonna
Oh my
clap for my
gosh.
son.
And we dropped the mic. That's where I get my
Wait, wait,
enthusiasm. Thank
Wait,
you.
were you just hiding this Brando impression from me? What's the
You know,
deal?
it's in there somewhere.
Every show's gotta happen.
You don't allow me to do best bad acting, Corbin.
Yeah.
Corbin doesn't allow it. So
It would only be Brando the whole time.
then I'd have to be Brando the whole time. Well, this
Oh.
was great. This was what a fun way to end too. Gay Alberts Ruby, aka my mom. We want to thank you so much for
Yes.
being a guest on the Moving Spotlight podcast. This was wonderful. Our very first in-person guest, even if this comes out in a different order, but you are our very first in-person guest. Corbin and I are so grateful that you're here and that you were, willing to do this, and some wonderful insight, not just about
Yes,
acting
for
and
sure.
storytelling and communicating, but also just about life. I can attest, my mom is a very happy, fulfilled, loving person. And so she kind of is the person she talks about. And so it's so wonderful to have her here and be able to share,
Yeah, it's great.
you with everyone. So thank you for
I
being
love
here.
you, John.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
so
I can't
sweet.
say it, but I love you
Corbin.
too.
Good to
Nice
meet you.
meeting you, Corbin.
Yeah, it was great meeting you. Thank you for coming.
All right. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Moving Spotlight. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Moving Spotlight podcast. Please rate and review us on your podcast app of choice and recommend us to a friend.
And we're on YouTube, so please like and subscribe there as well. And it helps other people find us, so please do that and like, subscribe, hit all the buttons and the bells, do all the things. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the
Moving Spotlight Podcast.